Hello, welcome to the channel and thanks for watching. So those of you that follow me on Instagram might realise that I've been on holiday for a couple of weeks away abroad with the family, so I didn't do any hobby in that time. But just before I went away, a bit of a lads weekend, although for my age, lads is a very loose description, where the three of us got together, did a 2,000 point matched play sort of mini tournament between ourselves, and a couple of things came out from that weekend that I want to talk about. Firstly, Death Guard are still very much a viable army, and I still think the best and most flexible force you can do in 40k. And secondly, I have a new most hated overpowered unit in 40k that I've ever played against, and the little lad that played against it as well thoroughly agrees. So firstly, Death Guard, why the viable, why the flexible? First, the models are cool, and I did most of the army with Rule of Cool as I started. However, you build an army in Rule of Cool, a couple of tweaks, and it can be a particularly viable force. The thing I would say about Death Guard, they are super flexible. You can build them in different ways, especially the core units. Now, the Demon Prince, it's a Robuke Guilliman conversion, it's been on the channel. It's never ever died until this weekend. I'll talk about that in a second. Unit of 10 Blight Lord Terminators, backed up by a Lord of Contagion. Very effective unit, very powerful, very resilient with invulnerable saves, usually. Then I take 4 units of 7 Plague Marines, 2 geared up for shooting, so a lot of bolt guns, Blight Launcher, 2 geared up for hand-to-hand combat. They can be a really devastating hand-to-hand combat unit, especially when you drop it into a Storm Eagle like I've got here. Both units gets transported in the Storm Eagle, can really fly in, drop and do some damage, and the Storm Eagle itself is particularly powerful. Now, last thing, rounding off with the Mephitic Blight Hauler in there and the Miasmic Malignifier. Now, this is the first opponent, Adeptus Custodes. I've played Adeptus Custodes a few times, not just this army, but in a tournament and in a local gaming club I've played them. They are a particularly nasty army. You can have some very powerful Jetbike characters, Contempt of Dreadnought you've seen there, and each individual squad can be really particularly devastatingly effective. So this was game 1, and it went relatively swimming for me. Don't like the Contempt of Dreadnought, so to fly past with the Storm Eagle, shot it to death, obliterated it from there. One particularly effective thing, especially against the high toughness Jetbikes, Plague Marines with a bolt gun and the Sigil of Decay. Hit on a 6, you wound automatically. Really does boost the firepower of the unit, work quite well. Demon Prince as ever, romped through, got into some hand-to-hand combats, and the Jetbikes were finished off by the Blight Lord Terminators, one of the best units I do believe that they can have. So game 2 was actually the Khorne playing against the Custodes. The Khorne army won, and here's the Khorne army that I faced, same army in the game where we've got a Khitan. This is a creature caster miniature, I believe, that he's using as a Bloodthirster, and the special Forge World model that, again, using it as a Bloodthirster in this instance. You'll see the Decimators in the middle, that's the unit we're going to talk about in a minute, and then a lot of demons to build up this demonic army, a lot of interesting little conversions and things, a lot of bloodletters. It's ran as a couple of detachments. Now, I want to particularly focus on the Decimators. This was the unit that the Custodes player had real difficulty against. Mortal wounds ripping through the Jetbikes. We'll focus on the exact rules later. I had similar difficulty, so I focused on the rest of the army. Took down the Khitan, actually mostly down to a single wound with the bolt gun fire from the Plague Marines. Demon Prince went in, failed against it. This was the pivotal combat. Both Bloodthirsters caught in with the bulk of my army. I swooped in with the flyer, dropped the troops off the sort of following turn, and piled my 2 close combat units in there against it, and the Blight Lords and the close combat Plague Marines managed to take them down. The thing that I found in my army particularly is players expect Death Guard to be slow and plodding. You drop a flyer in, you drop some Mephitic Blight Haulers in, they can actually be a fast, mobile army, and you can pop a couple of surprises in there. In the end of the game, it came down to literally the Plague Marine combat squads, the very, very last remnants of the Blight Lords taking down what is here the last bloodletter. If that bloodletter hadn't been taken down, I would have lost the game. So going back again to this Khorne army, why do I think these Decimators are dirty? You're only paying 160 points for each of these as we go into slow-mo mode. Fairly cheap. Toughness and resilience of a Dreadnought, and you can put a Soul Burner Petard on it, which in each arm gives you, as you can see here, the shots, Assault 2d3 for each arm, potentially 12 shots from one model, hitting on a 2 because he's boosted it with the characters that you can buff. If you then roll to wound, on a 1 you get a wound yourself, 2+ is a mortal wound to your opponent. These things are ridiculously powerful. Now he has got buff characters that are following around to buff them so they hit stronger. They can also heal themselves with that character, but they heal themselves for 1 wound themselves anyway with their infernal regeneration. These things ripped through the entire Jetbike squad from the Custodes, decimated the Dreadnought. Then when I played it, you saw the shot before, ripped through the Miasmic Malignifier, and really gave me massive problems. It took my flyer coming in, focusing all its fire on a couple of these to take them down, and they still, at the end of the game, were one of the last things that I managed to remove from the table. Quite nice models from Forge World, to be honest, and I really am considering joining the party of these awful units and converting up some Nurgle ones. So look, I'm sure there's more devastating and evil units that you might think of in the Force, but for me, I really do think overpowered, broken, disgusting, demonic shooting unit, which means I can take them for Nurgle. So I talked before about how flexible a Nurgle army is, especially Death Guard. You can take Vanguard detachments of other things, and a demonic army might be quite interesting to add in to my Nurgle force. And I always think that's a good guide of how overpowered and broken and hated a unit is, that when you play against it, you think, my God, and you start planning an army around that unit. So I still believe Death Guard, brilliantly flexible, loving my Death Guard. Tons of different things I've still got to add into this army, and it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, I'm assuming, but I'm really now considering doing a demonic allied attachment to it. So look, bit of a waffle, bit of a ramble, probably didn't make any sort of sense, but if it did, like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz, and I'll see you on another video.